Hey folks, how are you doing? Just gonna do a little bit of coloring tonight. I want to show you a pretty cool coloring effect you can do, lighting effects. Just one moment. All right, just just keeping it casual tonight. I'm not going to do something for too long, but I wanted to work on this page. I had some other contract work I did today, and so I'm getting a little bit of work in on this page. So I did do some changes last night after the stream. I continued working a little bit, and I made a few decisions that fixed one or two problems that I was having with this. So the main issue is, and this is something I often run into, is that I had too many light sources. So I want to kind of do this effect where the light is coming from primarily this dream prism that Sarah has, but I also want to have sort of a light in the back that's coming from this like illuminated smoke that's got some kind of a glow to it, right? And the problem is, because of the positioning of the way the lighting is set up in this scene, basically requires me to have too much of a convoluted lighting setup. So I kind of show you the problem is I had the light come from the window, right? And the window is to their left, right? It's kind of to the left from the front. So you can imagine the light coming in like that. So it would hit, this portion of the faces, right? And this part of the arm. And that works well if I'm not also having this light come from the back. And because of this lighting in the back, what I want to have is this kind of rim light that comes in on the other side of the characters. But there's not enough room for me to get the rim light, the main light, which is the light out the window, and then also this light from the dream prism. So I can't really do all three of them. So what I decided to do was cut the light from the window for this shot. And I don't like doing this kind of thing because it's inconsistent, because this shot, this panel, when I light it, you're gonna see the window light, right? And then it's suddenly gonna be different for this shot. But the reason I'm okay with that is because this moment is kind of it's a key moment where Sarah is becoming acutely aware that the dream prism she has is magical. And because of that, I sort of am going to let the rest of the world kind of fade out, right? And the dream prism is going to be the focus of everything. And more importantly, the rim light that's going to come from the back is going to be really magical too, because it's going to have this kind of purple color. And so that's going to be very different from what we've seen so far in her patient room. So it's going to create some interesting contrast with the other pieces. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone, because I can resolve my lighting problem, but I'm also creating a type of visual interest that will help separate this piece from the rest. So what I'm working on tonight is I'm adding this rim light to the backside. And so I'm going to pick that color, and here's my rim light layer. So a rim light is, for those of you who might not be aware where the terminology comes from, it's because it basically is like a light a streak of light that will go around the edge of something like that. It's a way to, generally, it's a way to separate characters from the background or separate elements. And it might be a little bit of a misnomer here because I'm not really going to just do it to the rim. This is something that's going to be used just realistically as though there was a light coming from behind the character. But because it favors because it's coming from the back, it's not going to really get much of them. So we're just going to see kind of a little hint of it. And there's going to be some cheating involved with this too, because I'm not going to limit it exclusively. Like, where would the light be? It's kind of this whole thing back here, right? So because of that, it's taking up a lot of space. And so I can basically have it cover as much or as little as I want. And if I don't use that window light, then I've got a lot of freedom here, because the Dream Prism doesn't really cast all that much light. It's a soft, it's a bright glow that doesn't go that far. It's kind of like if you have a candle. If you hold something right up to the flame, it's pretty bright, but if it moves just a couple of feet away, it's basically in darkness. So the light does not project very well. So it's a relatively dim light. And because of that, I can afford to have a little bit of contrast and maybe get a little bit more of this kind of purple color than I would normally be able to get on here. So little things like this. Even though the light's coming from below, I'm still going to have just a little hint of it at the top here. You know, just to give it kind of an interesting frame. There's a little bit to the right here too, just a hair, just a hint. So I'll get it on the edges of surfaces here. And this purple color is just, it's always it adds a really magical quality when you use these kinds of unusual colors like this for lighting, because purple light is just not something that you really see very often. So it communicates that this is a special scene. And this is right at the beginning of her first trip to Dreamside. So it's a really key moment in the story. So I want it to feel pretty magical. I get a little hint of the purple on her nose here. Even though her nose really would not receive the purple, it would have to like curve around like that, right? It's obstructed. I'm just going to get a little bit of that in there because I think it's interesting enough. And you can see it's a cheat. You know, it's not real. There's no way that purple light would reach there. But I'll put a little bit of it there anyway, because I make the rules with my own art. And in this case, I'm willing to take the chance that it will not look correct. I think I actually want to go a little bit more toward blue, kind of match what I had here before. Pretty cool looking, huh? And I might end up changing the layer style because right now this is just a normal layer. But I might need to make this glow a little bit more. We'll see. As of right now, it's giving me about the contrast level that I want. Yes, I was frustrated last night with it because I kept trying to make it work with too many light sources. It's a common problem. You know, I'm holding on to what's real about the scene rather than worrying about, you know, what's actually important. You know, if I eliminate that extra light source, no one's going to care. No one's going to look at it and say, well, this is unrealistic. Why don't we see the light come from the window? But I still worried about it at the cost of getting, an appealing result. And that's really what's far more important. Don't you think? Hot Buns, good to see you. Always good to see Hot Buns. Came across the animated first chapter of Dreamside. Well, thank you for checking that out. I wonder where you saw it, because I think I took that off my channel. But that chapter video, which is pretty neat, that was using the original artwork. So that's like 2 generations ago. So what's kind of neat is the art in that has all been updated. And I think that the new stuff is pretty nice. I haven't really shown too much of chapter 1. The painting that I use as the thumbnail for these live streams is from chapter 1. And so it's very pretty now. Very, very pretty. But thanks for checking that out. And you actually heard what is one of my favorite musical themes that was composed by my friend Michael, who's doing the soundtrack for it. I think he did a pretty awesome job on that chapter. See, I'm bringing that purple into her. See what that does? It adds a really magical quality to it, I think. What do you think? I think that's pretty cool. I feel bad for my European friends that might want to hang out. It's a little too late over there. Unless they're extremely early risers. Of course, if they are, then they've got better things to do than listen to me. Nobody intentionally gets up at, what is it over there? 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock? Unless they have a good reason. I'm working out a better plan for music for these. There is a company called Chill Hop, which does these really, really cool collections of music that are very relaxing. And I actually have found myself listening to them incidentally while I work. And it turns out that you can license them for your videos. And I'm working on a way to get the music to come through the computer rather than just through the mic. So that'll be kind of neat, because then I can have much better sounding music. And that will be a lot more enjoyable to listen to. John, that looks beautiful. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for coming by. It's so much more fun to do this when people are hanging out with me. It's a pretty lonely process when you do it by yourself. So thanks for coming by. You make it easier and you make it better. Everything about the work that I've done just in these few live streams is better than the stuff I was doing prior to the live streams, because of your encouragement and your support. That makes it all just go better. So even though you're not actually working on Dreamside, in a way you are working on Dreamside. And the project will be better off because of you. You might have noticed that I kind of jump around pieces. I'm pretty disorganized with this stuff. And part of that's because sometimes I kind of feel like I know just what to do with one particular part. And I want to get in there and work on that one part. I get excited about it. If I get excited about it, it's usually best if I get in there right then and there and do it, because I might forget, or it might not be as easy for me to figure out what to do later. I love putting these wrinkles in like this because if you notice, the way that she's holding her fist, it would require her to rotate her arm, right? So her arm is rotated here. And since her sleeve is kind of a tightly constrained to her arm, it's going to rotate with her hand. And that's going to cause this type of distortion in the fabric. You see how that looks a lot more realistic. Like if you look at it without it, you can't tell that her arm is rotated. But here, that distortion makes more sense. I think that's right. I guess it wouldn't really be rotated that much, but the wrinkles still look cool, so I'm going to leave them there. Yeah, just having some kind of a indication of the bend of the fabric is good to have. And let this be an example of why it's more important, in my opinion, to make something look appealing than to look correct. Appealing is better than correct, because people don't really care that much if things are incorrect, if they're appealing. It's kind of like, I remember when I worked at Insomniac Games, and I had a discussion with a friend of mine about change designs over time, you know, where you have maybe things are a little bit different in sequels, you know, characters look different. And we kind of came to the consensus that people don't really care if things look different, provided they look better. So there's some people, of course, who, you know, would prefer that you keep to the, you know, the designs that you had. But for the most part, people seem to be fine with things changing so long as they're better. Because there were some characters here and there that changed over time, and so I kind of operate with the same concept, but in other ways. It's not, obviously it's not about changes, because this book has not yet come out, but it's more that I think you can apply the same thing toward realism. And, you know, that's part of the reason that I think I can get away with this purple color here. It's not realistic, really, that it's down here. The color wouldn't reach her arm. There are too many things that are obstructing it, but it looks cool. It looks really appealing, and so I think I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to push it even further. So maybe I'll bring some of that purple down here into the shirt, where we have the wrinkles down here. Since I shared this page from the point that I redrew the line art, you can see the amount of time and effort that goes into each of these. And that's why Dreamside takes so long. It's a slow process, but believe it or not, things are getting faster as I go. I want to be careful with this, actually, because that's dipping a little bit too much into the angle that would be getting hit with the Dream Prism light, which is a yellow light that's different. It's funny, too, because the Dream Prism would actually kind of have a white light, because it's this rainbow that all the colors are glowing together. And when you have all the colors of a rainbow that glow together, it creates white light. But I'm tinting it toward yellow because I want to create a warm, cool contrast. So what's in the foreground feels a bit warmer, and what's in the background feels a bit cooler. That helps create a separation. So the smoke that's in the background is cool, and the characters in the foreground are warmer, they're hotter. So I'm using hotter, warmer colors to help bring them forward and recede the background and just create, in general, a separation between the two. That's a great way of doing that. As with most things that I try, I never know if it's going to work. I just try it because I think I've stumbled on something that's sort of cool. And there's certain things that are very tightly designed. There are reasons that I have to have certain designs because they're required by the story. But when it comes to things like lighting arrangements for specific shots like this, sometimes I just have to experiment until it's correct. And I've had times where I have a hopeless amount of trial and error with some shots. I have one that was, I would say, definitely the worst time I've ever had with Dreamside. Was one. It was the last one that I worked on before I actually took a break and went to work on Yucca. And it's the first art spread, which I still haven't shown. When they actually get into the world of Dreamside, and it's such an incredibly important piece to get just right. And I struggled with this piece for a long time, long time, months. I think I had hundreds of revisions of this one picture. And the reason it was so complicated was not only because the picture was really tough to work out, but also because it's a piece that conveys just kind of what Dreamside is. And I wanted all that to be communicated within this one image. So there's a lot of weight behind it. It's probably the most important image in the book, in the first book. So there's a lot of import behind it. So because of that, I just could not get it right. And there were so many things that I wanted to convey that I didn't feel were being conveyed. And so there's a lot of back and forth on that to try and get it just right. And I'm not the sort of artist who can kind of sit with something that's not working. I have to fix it. I have to make it work, or it'll bother me. Like every other piece that I work on will be hindered by the fact that I couldn't work out that one problem. No matter how good the rest of the book is, I'll always just be thinking about that one spread that just didn't quite work. So to keep myself from losing my mind, I go through and fix it until it's good to go. It's really useful to know a thing or two about anatomy to help with the kind of stuff I'm doing right now. And there's a lot of stuff I don't know about it, but I feel like I know just enough to get what I am going for with this. So it's not really something that has to be, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be appealing. As I said, appeal is more important than realism. How's everyone doing tonight? I wonder if everyone's watching is in the US right now. Alicia, thanks for coming. I love your art style. I totally feel you on your struggling. My art mistakes also stand out more than the piece itself. Yeah, isn't that just the way it goes? Yeah, it's true. But you know what? It's the it's the mistakes that are really just stepping stones. I like to think of mistakes and struggles in general to just they're basically goals that you had to reach. They just don't seem like goals, but I think that they are, because they kind of have to happen. If you were in a position where you were going to make a mistake, or struggle on a piece like I just described, it's a struggle that just has to happen. And the sooner you can get to it, the sooner you can get past it. And also, that's really how you discover really incredible art. I mean, I think that's really where it comes from. It doesn't have to be a struggle all the time, but I mean, if it's not a struggle, it seems kind of strange. Like, it seems like it kind of has to be difficult. Otherwise, you're not really creating something that other people, I think, will get much out of, if it doesn't challenge you a little bit. Because otherwise, it's something that I think most people could either do or could. You're not giving people a really challenging idea to think about. One way I want Dreamside to challenge the industry, really, because that's the arrogant jerk that I am, is I want to push back against this really irritating habit that the industry seems to have of creating books with beautiful cover art that only to trick you into buying it, so that when you open the book, inside the art's not quite so great. That kind of thing really bothers me. And this justification that, because it's, a comic, the art, we can't really spend the time on it. I think it's kind of a weird catch-22, because people will say that, comic arts have to be produced quickly because people read comics quickly. And the problem I have with that is maybe the reason that people read them quickly and that they don't really stick is because the art is a bit too rough and a bit too, unpolished. And that maybe if we produce something that's more time consuming, something that it really took a lot of effort, that it will stick a bit more in the reader's mind and they'll want to stare a bit longer on the pages. And that will maybe in turn translate into more support from fans and people who enjoy this stuff. Or I could be totally wrong about that. And I understand everyone's got a budget that they're working with, and they, it's just it's funny. It's sort of a chicken and egg situation. Is it that people want quickly produced comics because that's just the way people read comics, or is it that people just have gotten used to comics being so rough and simplistic in their art style that, and of course, this is not all comics. Of course, there's some unbelievably well-drawn comics, but I do find that it's a common thing, because I don't so much these days, but one of the things that I did quite a lot was I would go to bookstores like, Barnes & Noble, and I would just take a look through the comics and the graphic novels, and I would see these amazing covers, and it was like clockwork. I'd pick up one of these books, I'd look at it, amazing cover, and then disappointing interior art. It's not even so much that it's worse art, it's that stylistically it's just so different. Kind of a weird bait and switch. I really love this pencil tool. It's just the basic pencil that comes with Procreate, but I did make a few adjustments to it. I think I reduced the texture just slightly on it. And what else did I do to it? I changed how wide it gets when I turn it on its side, I believe. And I actually have several versions of it. It's a 6B pencil. So if you're using Procreate, you can get the same brush I'm using. I tweeted out earlier that I was struggling with Procreate because I found a bug. And I was confused because I knew that the new version of Procreate just came out, the new 5X, which I was excited to try, but I didn't want to download because I'm used to giving things a little bit of time, you know, especially for programs that are really important for my workflow, just in case there are any sort of bad bugs or anything. But I guess it updated without my permission. So I don't know if I have a setting that I need to adjust there. But anyway, I was using the updated version, and it has a bug with the version of iOS that I had, which is older. That seems to have resolved itself since I updated the iOS. But basically, the color picker would not revert to the brush. So it's like if I went to pick color, it would not revert back to the brush. So that was a problem because I basically couldn't paint. But anyway, the situation seems to have resolved itself. Procreate it just blows me away. I can't believe this software works as well as it does and is as cheap as it is. So, Alicia, I want to know more about your art. So why don't you tell me what you do? I try and find edges in things. And it's one of the reasons I really love this pencil brush is that it gets a rigid edge. You know, if I draw like that, I get, you know, this solid edge, which I can then soften in certain areas, you know. So I can soften it there, but I can keep the hard edge here. And it's a great feeling brush to very quickly be able to get interesting hard and soft edges, because that's really where you get tremendous appeal, is when you can mix hard and soft edges together. The two of them together work really, really well. And juxtaposing between them is good, because sometimes if you look at art that's all soft edge, it just looks kind of blurry and mushy. So you want to make sure that you bring some shapeliness out of it. You know, make sure that you have, like on the pillow here, there would be some wrinkles in here that would be a little bit more rigid, and you would see a brighter reflection of light. Alicia, you do acrylic paintings of horses, nothing fancy. That sounds pretty neat. When I lived in Burbank, California, there was this area called the Rancho District where they have like a lot of horseback riding, and kind of led into Griffith Park, which was this relatively large park that was easy to access. And I actually lived in a place that had a horse stable in the backyard, because the landlord rented out the stables to people who had horses. So there would occasionally be different horses in my backyard, which is pretty neat and a little freaky at night because they sometimes make funny noises. But that is very cool. So what leads you to paint horses? Is that just a passion? Since we're seeing the mattress here from an angle, the wrinkles are going to behave a little bit differently from our perspective. They're going to be thinner because they're angled, right? So I don't want as much vertical space between the wrinkles, like I did when it's angled up like this. I want them to be more slivery because we're as we look at the bed from an angle, they're going to appear to be thinner because of the perspective. So we'll get a few more lines in there, and that'll help communicate the depth. If I go too crazy with this purple, it's okay because I can always pull back on it. It's on a separate layer. There won't be any problem with that. Horses are your passion. That is very cool. Well, you know, when you find something like that that is a great passion, it leads to a lot of great art. I mean, that's where it comes from, is something that you're passionate about, you know. So if you can think of something that you are passionate about, it's going to help in creating better art overall, for sure. So it'd be nice to check out the horse paintings sometime. Looks like you're on Facebook. So yeah, you could even comment with your paintings if you have any digitally, and then I can check them out. I'm streaming this with StreamYard, which actually hosts on multiple platforms at the same time. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it as a YouTube broadcast. If you're watching on Facebook, then it will be on Facebook. And I'm also broadcasting to Twitch, but that's not terribly active. So I'm just doing it because I can. So let me know what you think about the music, because I would like to get music on here that is appropriate. And, you know, music really helps me draw, but at the same time, you know, sometimes people like putting on live streams where they can listen to their own music. And if I'm playing it, then you can't really do both at the same time. But if if I got a better broadcast of music on here, then it would be a lot more enjoyable to listen to. Then again, I guess you're listening to my voice anyway, so unless it happens to blend with what you're listening to. See, I added some specular highlights to their face. That's this right here. So we get an idea of the skin texture, because without those, it's a little bit hard to get the texture difference between her skin, her shirt, and her hair, for example. This gives us an idea because it makes the skin look a little bit more moisturized, and it keeps the shirt looking a little drier, and you know, you can tell that it's a different material. So getting those indications in there is important if you want everything to kind of feel distinct. Your reader should be able to feel the materials of things. It makes your world feel more tangible. I'm not thrilled with how flat her leg looks here, so I'm going to have to play with that a little bit. So I need to add a little bit more detail in there. What I might actually do is put another level of reflection here with the purple. I'm using, when I when I make the stroke here, I'm rotating the pencil to follow the contour of the shape. So since her leg is formed like a cylinder, I'm making these arcs, these circles. They look like that. Okay. That'll help communicate the shape of the object that I'm drawing. Lisa, I hope your project is coming out the way you want them to. I followed for a few years, but this is the first time I got a live stream notification. Yeah. Well, I just started doing them recently, so it's good that notifications are getting out. Mix of music and stories and talking through the process. Good. Yeah, that's what the plan is right now. It's kind of interesting because I'm trying to share more about the process, and I've been pretty upfront with, not only is this something that's enjoyable for me, but it's something that I think I kind of have to do as an independent artist these days, because I think you just kind of have to share with people, because it's one of the only ways that I can let people know what I'm doing and keep interest building in what I'm working on, is I feel like I have to show it. I have to show off the process a little bit, which is a new and different and kind of scary thing for me, because I don't want to give away too much about the story. And it's kind of impossible to show the actual production process without, giving things away. And we're just kind of trying this year, because right now I happen to be working on stuff that I don't think is a huge problem to give away. And it's all from book 1 too, which, if you did see the video series that was referenced earlier, it's all been online, the story for the first book, although there are some changes that are being made to it. And actually quite a bit of it is being rewritten, but the content that's in there is pretty similar. All right. I've got to restart this. So I'm probably doing a bit of overkill on the purple here. But again, I can always pull that back. And another thing that I'm doing here is, I'm going to turn that off for a second here. You can see I've got a separate second shadow layer here that's adding a little bit of extra contrast. So I'm using that strategically where I can. So I'll switch back and forth here because I want to occasionally work with that. Because there are certain areas, like down here, this is going to be pretty dark. So add some extra darkness down here. If you're familiar with the concept of I can't remember what it's called now. ambient occlusion. Basically, there's a gathering of darkness in cracks of things. So like, for example, in the shadows here, there's going to be a little bit extra darkness. And so I bring that in, even though it's not exactly the same thing as a cast shadow. It's more of like an ambient shadow. So I don't think quite in the same terms as I would about a cast shadow. It's more that I kind of trace around the connection of things. So it creates a little bit of an extra bit of like anchoring contrast, which is important. I don't like to go too nuts with it though, because it can be a little on the gaudy side if you have a little too much shadow in there. So I've got to make sure that I don't go too far with it. But areas where light doesn't really reach, it's good to get a little extra darkness in there. And sometimes when I need to isolate an area, I'll make a selection. Selections are really, really helpful for this kind of thing. I don't want to go nuts and do it everywhere, because then I'm just constantly making selections and it's just kind of just takes away from the painting process. I don't like getting too technical or too digital. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping things relatively organic, but sometimes just to mask out areas and make sure that I don't mess up something that I spend a lot of time on. Like, for example, I want to isolate my shading here to this area here. And so I want to be able to do that kind of roughly without, because I'm not making a very precise shadow. I'm making this sort of ambient occlusion shadow. I want to darken this area here, but that way it doesn't affect the arm. So you can see if I turn that off, you can see how it kind of makes a pretty big difference with the contrast of the piece. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's it might be a little bit too much contrast, but we'll kind of see, and I can weigh it back and forth as I go and just make sure that we're not going crazy with it. Elisa, Dreamside has not yet been published. No, I moved on to another project for a while, and I'm coming back to Dreamside now. It's going to be going to Kickstarter. There's actually going to be 6 books. So there's quite a lot of stuff going into Dreamside. So it's a pretty big project now, and I'm full steam ahead on it. So it's going to be probably around 100 pages per book, and there will be 6 of them. So an awful lot of illustrations. I really love detailing wrinkles in clothing. There's something about it that I love getting that tangibility in there, where you can really sense the weight and the form. I get a little bit more of that yellow in the rest of the image. One of the reasons that I relegated it to where it is here, I need to get a little darker with it. one of the reasons that I relegated it is because I had that really intense light coming from the window, which I took out. And now that I took that out, I kind of need a little bit more description for the dream prism light, which is really now the main light. Because that purple is a secondary light source. So we need to make sure that the main light gets its due, and we don't just have it limited. Because one of the ways that you can make sure that your art is really uninteresting is to have too many flat areas that don't have enough tonal variation. So it's good to make sure that you have a lot of tonal variation and you don't have those kind of flat regions. Because really, even if something is not in direct light, the tonal variation is important because you want to create that visual interest. So that's where that cheating comes into play. You know, having not worrying necessarily about the realism of the lighting, but thinking instead about just what makes it look more interesting is good to do. Now, you see what I did here that's kind of a mistake. I don't like what I did here. So I made this too sharp of a line on her leggings, and the problem with that is it makes them look shiny. And they're not shiny, they're like a cotton, like a dull cotton. So light really doesn't reflect on cotton like that. Sorry if that was loud. But yes, Dreamside will be published. I mean, my company, Dream Prism, is the publisher for the book. It's independently published, and so it's going to be made available on Kickstarter. Right now, I've got my first book, which was Ukulele. That one is available in my store right now. So if you haven't picked it up, then you can go grab a copy. I think I have probably about maybe, how many I have left of that. But it's the first printing, the first Dreamside book that's actually produced. So that one's kind of neat because I'm going to be doing a lot of books. This is just the beginning. So that one is a cool one to own. But I will admit it has a relatively specific audience in mind. Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit of this yellow into the Dream Girl's hair here. So the hair seems to have a little bit of a glow to it. It's not really exactly a light source, but again, I'm just cheating. Okay, because the yellow, it doesn't really reach this far in other areas. Although I might push it a little bit so it does, just because I need to get a bit more interest in here. I'm going to try a different layer style for this purple. That's a bit too bright. Changed a few features in this new version of the software. Yeah, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave it alone for now. I might change it. Yeah, by keeping all the lighting separately from other layers, separate from other layers, I can very easily make adjustments to each bit of lighting, which is really useful. Because if I collapse everything and it's all in one layer, if one area is maybe a little bit too intense, I can kind of end up in a situation where I've got a very difficult edit to make. I might not be able to do it without really messing up the art. But by keeping it in a separate layer, if I do something that is risky and it maybe messes with the painting and I don't like it and I want to get rid of it, I'm not trashing the whole painting. I'm just, getting rid of that layer that was a problem. It's kind of amazing as you do this stuff, you keep discovering ways to make it better. Or overwork it. Both happen. This surface here is plastic. So plastic is going to get something kind of interesting. It's going to get a little bit of a reflection that's going to be right underneath. This is based on our perception, based on the angle that we're looking at it. There's going to be a little bit of a reflection of that bright light. It's going to be on the plastic there. So we're going to get both an illumination of the side that is facing the light and a little bit of a reflection. That gets a pretty sharp light there because we're just really seeing the edge of it. It would be receiving light from that area. Doesn't exactly have a sharp edge, it kind of rounds, but it's a little bit like a beveled edge. It's on these side structures here. Do I use Procreate on an iPad or is this through a computer? This is on the iPad, but I'm I'm projecting the image through the computer so that I can do the live stream, but I'm drawing on an iPad that is connected to a computer. But Procreate, as far as I'm aware, is only available on the iPad. One of the things that I think makes the software work really well is that they know that you're going to be using it on an iPad because it's restricted to that platform. So they're not trying to make something that could be on any variety of platforms work. You know, it's very, very difficult for software developers to do that because, you know, if you're running into problems with the software, maybe you're getting crashes or whatever, it's like, you know, there might be some conflict with your computer, but because they know it's on the iPad, they can have absolute control and know exactly how it's going to be used for everybody. That's really useful. So it allows them to optimize the software really well. And I think that's why it works so well. It's kind of like, you know, video games made for like the Nintendo platform as opposed to on a computer, which is, there's going to be a tremendous amount of variation. Occasionally I'll deviate from what I'm doing. Eye highlights are interesting because, you know, highlights are really just reflections of light that would be in the room. But again, why not cheat? Because we don't really know where the lighting is coming from. Although I don't like that. Other than what we see in the cast lighting on objects, right? So if we see that a character is receiving light, you know, like the purple, we know that there's a light over here that is projecting purple onto them. Of course, I don't want you thinking too hard about that because then you'll start to realize how impossible it is for that to actually occur. See how I'll switch back and forth between sharp lines, and then I turn the pencil and I do a wide stroke. So I get a mix between these thin, sharp lines for hair and a block of light. I know that I want to have a pretty bright area of purple here, because this is a plane change here. You know, we're seeing the hair at a different angle, and so I want that I want to really communicate that that's like a twist in the hair. So this part is clearly exposed, you know, by the purple light. This is a fun process because it's like solving puzzles. You know, figuring out how the lighting would drop, how to make sure that it drops in a way that's appealing. All of this is just like sorting through puzzles. So it's like I'm solving puzzles all day long. And in this case, well into the night. Lala Papa, thank you. Appreciate it. Just one step at a time. There's certain areas where the the light is going to be a bit brighter than others, because I don't want it to just be. It's you don't want to get too, I guess, technical about it, because you want to have enough variation in it that it's still interesting to look at. That's important. I'm going to change the color to a slightly whiter shade because I do want to get some highlights in the hair. So that really adds to that textural clarity. So there's certain areas where there's like a brighter, more intense color, intense highlight, really. Still getting used to the new software update because they moved a few things. I was never very organized to begin with it, but it's kind of like when you have a really messy space, but you know where things are, and if you clean it, you kind of have to relearn where to go for your stuff. But you know it's an improvement. I think this adds a lot more realism. compared to how I was doing the art before, which was just, it was a little bit cartoonier. And Dreamside is sort of a, you know, it's a world I want to feel very real. And I think if I can make it almost hyper real, it makes the fantasy elements of it all the more potent and almost they'll be more affecting. Because if it feels very real, when something happens that's a bit outlandish, it gives you that kind of exciting chill. It's a little hard to describe, but it's, if I do my job the right way, then everything has a bit more weight. It's kind of like if you see a, you know, kind of a spooky monster in a horror movie versus going to a haunted house and you know, at Halloween or something, and experiencing the difference between something that's on screen and something that's in the real world. Obviously, I can't, you know, give you the real world experience because it is a book after all. But if I do it well, I can make it a bit more impactful and make it feel very real. So you can spend quite a long time on her hair. And I want to pick out a few areas, I think, in her hair to really make it shine. I almost want to just do a paint over. I want to recede these lines a little bit, which I do by coloring them. So change the color from black because the dark color brings out a little too much contrast for areas that are not as important for us to look at. Coloring the line helps bring out the more illustrative quality of the style that I'm using. I think I need a brighter glow on the Dream Girl's face. Whenever I do something that might mess up everything, I'll duplicate the layer, turn off the old one, and work on this new one. That way, if I make a bad mistake, I can always revert. And I do that a lot. So I want to just bring out the brightness on her face a little bit. The Dream Girl is really tricky because communicating her state of mind is really tough. because she's like a magical character, but she also should seem genuinely intrigued by what's happening. So she needs to seem simultaneously almost godlike, because she's hyper aware of what's happening, but she's also amazed by it. So it's an odd mix with her, and it's tough to get that just right. If you've watched any of my other streams, then you know that I flip the canvas a lot as a way of checking the to make sure that I don't have any really bad positionings of anything, because stuff can really, you get kind of like a lopsided eye, or the expression just seems a little warped. It's very easy to do that kind of thing with faces. And so I flip the canvas because it's kind of like when you look in a mirror. If you've ever seen, like if you've been looking in a mirror your whole life and then you see like a photograph that shows what you actually look like, it's the mirror of what you're used to seeing, because the mirror is actually showing the mirror is showing you the actual mirror version of yourself. But to you, it looks really strange. And the reason for that is because unless you have a perfectly symmetrical face, which very, very few people do, if, say, for example, your right eye is a little bit lower in your face than your left eye, then when you look through the reflection, it's going to look like it's your right eye that's lower on your face. And because that stands out, you sort of commit it to memory as being the thing that, where one of your eyes sinks a little bit. But the thing is, because you get used to it over time, when you see something different, and it's the degree of different in the opposite direction, it becomes a lot more apparent to you. And so in the same way, when I flip the canvas, it shows me my problems very clearly. Like if I made an eye too low on the left, but I got used to it, because I've been drawing for a while and I don't really notice. Well, if I flip the canvas, then it's gonna show me that in a heartbeat. Very, very quickly, I'm gonna see the problem. I'm really trying to work the lighting on this so that there's kind of a magical warmth to this. Might need to desaturate this a little bit. I don't know if I want to go more or less warm. Maybe just a touch. Because the light really should be white. It's not, it's not really so yellow, but. Nah, I'm going to leave it yellow. All right. We're getting close. I'm going to bring a bit of that yellow light onto more of the picture though. So I'm going to brighten it up a little bit, because that's now my main light source. So as I said before, I had this very bright window light that I got rid of. So my rules have changed a little bit. So I'm going to let myself get a little bit brighter with this light. Sometimes I find little mistakes like this where I didn't fill in an area. It's best you fix little things like that, even if they seem like nobody will notice. Unless you have them everywhere. If you're consistent, then I think people are fine with it. But if you kind of clean up everything except one little thing, that it stands out. It's funny. If you have more things that are left out, I think that's better than if you only have a few. So a lot of this right now, I'm kind of just bringing in a bit of ambient light because I want that tonal variation in here. Well, it may be a bad idea for for a book. I generally think it's okay to sort of overcommit to these pieces. Do something that is going to take a long time, because I find that if you do spend a lot of time on a piece, it becomes disproportionately memorable. As in, you won't really remember how much time you spent on it, but it will kind of live on forever. If you make something that's a bit more memorable. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm trying so hard with these pieces, to make something that is going to really stand out. All right, it might actually blow out that light a little bit in the back. Make it even brighter than it is. It's not only going to explain the brighter light, but it's also going to help me pop the characters out a bit more. It's like Sarah's head here is got more contrast with the background. Even if it's not terribly realistic. It's all right. Sort of conveniently arranging this light so that it creates an outline around her head. So you might be wondering why I don't just use a darker color for the standard shadow layer, and just kind of paint around it, like certain areas with a lighter color, certain areas with a darker color. The reason that I keep it separate is because of editability. I want to be able to come in and make large changes. And the thing is, I don't like having too many tonal variations in a layer, because, for example, if the entirety of the shadow is using one color, then it's very easy for me to make edits because I know exactly what color to use regardless of where it is on the layer. And then I can make another layer for an increased level of shadow darkness. All right, I can use a slightly different color if I want to. I can do whatever I want. Now I can have multiple colors on one layer, but the more I do that, the more confusing it's going to be in terms of making edits. And I'm very, very aware of the need to make edits because I make a lot of edits. In fact, this entire artistic process, what I'm doing right now, is an edit for a piece that was already basically finished. So keeping these adjustable is important. So I try and stay organized as I go so that if I have to come back and make changes, I can. What are we thinking so far, folks? Is this coming to life? I'm going to make a selection here. I just made a selection so I can darken the area right behind Sarah here and help her separate a bit more. It's very, very subtle, but one of the things I like to do is I create a new layer that's an overlay layer that I put on top of the color. And I pick out certain areas that I want to sort of pop out and intensify the colors. Doing a little paint over here. Which will, it kind of ignores my layer structure. You know, I'm putting this above the shadow layer, but doing a little bit of a paint over, just like as if it was a painting. I can just do whatever I feel like. It's as though it's a flat painting with no digital layering. And doing this here and there lets me do things like pop out the dream girl's hair and make it really shine. Lala, question, are you going for a rainbow-ish 3D image blend? I'm not totally sure what you mean by that, but yeah, I'm trying to basically get a rendered look that has these sort of rainbow gradients work throughout. So this character's hairstyle and hair coloring changes scene by scene. But kind of her natural state is that she has this rainbow hair, which is, as you can see, kind of a bit of a nightmare to paint. It's just very time consuming. I did make a brush for her hair in Clip Studio, which is the painting software I used prior to Procreate, and still occasionally use now. But the problem with making the brush is as detailed as I was able to get it, and as awesome as that tool is, the problem is that the hair is always going to kind of take on the same basic shape. Because if I'm using a brush to draw it, it's going to draw what I have in the brush. And then I would make edits as need be, so I would take it to a certain degree of finished, and then I would make any sort of edits that I needed to. So if I wanted to make it look a little bit different than, hair on the adjacent pages or something like that, then, I can always add to it. I think I meant to put this on top of the line. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's really, I mean, it just depends kind of on what the intention is shot by shot. In this case, it's just really it's just a gradient, it's a series of gradients. And part of it is just adding color where I think it would look good. Why do you have a smarter way of doing it than what I'm doing? Because that would be helpful. The problem is that there are tools that I can use. Like, for example, Procreate has the ability to do a gradient brush where it will, as I draw the line, it will change the colors, which is very cool. But the problem is the more digital control I have, the less organic control I have over it. And I actually want to pick the colors, very precisely. So even if I make, a tool that can make things a little bit faster, like a gradient brush, I'm still going to want to come in there and make, changes here and there. you know, and I don't want to just do one big gradient, you know, like do like a grayscale and then do just a gradient paint over, because I think that wouldn't look very realistic. It's more interesting, I think, if you've got these tonal variations in the hair that are just carefully picked, carefully chosen, carefully added. As far as I know, there's no faster way to do this. You know, not provided that I want it to look a certain way. Well, the problem with creating a brush is that it'll be different needs for every drawing. You know, like the position of her hair here is different than here. And actually this one right here, let's see if I can turn this off. This hair, I'm just going to turn that on exclusively. So it turns off the line here, but what you see here, this is actually the brush. So I created what was called a ribbon brush in Clip Studio. And so what it would do is it would follow the trajectory of the pen. So like in this case, I drew something that kind of looked like that. Like that was the angle of my stroke for this. And then it bends the brush that I drew. The color information is all in there. And I could do it piece by piece. So I had like a top piece, I had a side piece, I had a back piece, and then I had some loose strands. And that way, if I wanted the hair to go in a different direction, I could do that. So that's cool, but it's impossible for me to use a brush and then get this degree of customization. You know, to get like the hair in just this exact position, it would be too difficult to do with a brush because there's too much custom need as I go. Yeah, the ribbon brush feature, yeah, well, Clip Studio in general has really fantastic brush tools because you can put color information in the brushes. So that alone is fantastic because as far as I know, you still can't do that in Photoshop, which I don't understand. But brushes can only contain grayscale information, you know, for your alpha, right? So like what will be opaque versus what will be transparent in the brush, you only have grayscale information. But in Clip Studio, you can actually save, basically you can just make a brush out of an image. So like you can paint the hair, which is really what I did. I painted the hair to be a certain image. And then I just turned that image into a brush that can follow the contours of the stroke that I make with the pen. So it's a very cool feature. Clip Studio has some amazing tools like that. Procreate, unfortunately, does not have that kind of feature. But you can make, you know, brushes in Procreate, just not with color information like that. Oh yeah, not sold on Procreate. Yeah. No, I understand. And I mean, it just comes down to using the tool that you like. It doesn't really matter. My recommendation for sure is just use whatever works best for you. That's all that matters. I've found good results with Procreate. But as I've said, you know, when I first used it, I didn't really like it that much. I got I tried the iPad. I was using Wacom tablets before that, and I was just curious about the iPad because people were doing some pretty cool stuff on it. And I thought, you know what, if the iPad did work for what I needed, that would be cool because it's so much less expensive than the other equipment that I was getting. And I thought if I could make the iPad work. And the other thing too that really appealed to me about the iPad was the battery life. Because one consistent issue that I kept running into is that I would, run out of battery power, and I really liked to work on the go. So I would take the stuff out and take it to cafes or go to a park or do whatever, and I would need to have a bit of I needed to have a good amount of battery life for that. And so the Companion, as wonderful as it was in the mobile studio, the problem with those is relatively poor battery life, comparatively speaking. Because you had a device that was designed for high power use. So you would be able to do complex 3D operations and things like ZBrush, and it had a great amount of power to it. So, but the thing is, most of what I was doing was illustration work. So the computer was using a Windows operating system, and it had to kind of keep that all functional while here I am just trying to do some relatively simple illustration stuff. So I think that was the major problem. I just realized that I got the wrong color there for the mattress. When I have to go in and make, because I'm not very smart, I don't create palettes enough. So I have to go in and turn off a bunch of layers so that I can pick the color for these areas and make sure they match. Clip Studio can be confusing for sure. Hot Buns found my channel by looking for Clip Studio help. Fantastic. Yeah, it is confusing, and it's one of those things where you use what you need, and you kind of ignore the rest. Like, just figure out an operation that you're actually trying to do, and then you don't have to really worry about everything else. See what the hair additions do? That's it before, and that's after a paint over. That adds a lot. Yeah, I think I can delete the old yellow light layer, because I think what I did there is an improvement. Let's add some sparklies. Everybody loves sparklies. Procreate actually has a great tool for this. It has this glimmer brush. I made a different glimmer brush that lets me kind of do them one by one, because the idea basically is that you would go in and just draw all over the place and it would put these random sparkle effects. But just like everything, I want to have control over the stuff that I do. I think it's going to give me a lot more. Just basically, if I could do it with a traditional painting, then I'm happy. Because I want to make sure that I don't want to have a lot of randomized elements in the stuff. Sometimes that can look good, but with the way that I'm doing stuff here, it doesn't quite work. Giving a little bit of magic to that smoke cloud in the back. Lala loves doing digital on a PC or laptop or the iPad isn't worth your time and energy. Yeah, like I said, it's it's really good if you can find a system that works for you, and stick with that. Stick with that. There's no need to change the system just because it sounds like it, or a lot of people are telling you that it's a good option. It's like, just stick with what works for you. It doesn't matter. Better to use something that you're comfortable with. Even if there was a better option out there, it's better to use something that you're comfortable with, because you'll be more likely to work on stuff. And that's way more important. I want to get some of these kind of floating sparkles around her eyes. As you can see, her eyes are glowing because there's a connection between her and that dream prism. What do we think? Yeah, it's taken a while. Well, actually, this I've colored this throughout the live streams that I did the past few days. So I'd say that this is probably, what is this? I think the third one that I've worked on. You know, one of the reasons it takes a while to color this stuff is because I'm figuring it out as I go. There's a lot of stuff that I can't really visualize until I get it down, you know, and I can start to compare and see where problems exist and what could be improved. So that process takes a while. I think if I could visualize the finished piece a little bit better than I can, it would be easier, you know, to then sit down and get the stuff made. But I don't really have that ability, unfortunately. So I've got to work with the artistic mind I have, which has some limitations. So yeah, things take a little bit longer than they need to. But that's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes. I've got to color the left side. And yeah. All right, well, I'll tell you what. I think I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. So I want to thank everyone for coming, as always. This is great. I'm still sorting through the ideal time to do these, but in general, if I'm working on this stuff and it's something that's not a spoiler, I'm trying to do it live so people can see the production of Dreamside in real time, and that I think would be a lot of fun. So you can let me know what you think about the right time. Obviously, you being here kind of late at night, this is a little bit of a different different time that I've been doing. And I'm actually leaning toward doing most of them in the morning, possibly around 10 or noon, somewhere between 10 a.m. and noon my time, which is Eastern time. And I think the reason I like that is because most people that are following my channels are either in the US, Canada, or Europe, or basically within that same time zone. And by doing it around noon, you know, it's 9 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. It's 5 o'clock p.m. in areas of Europe and 5 or 6 p.m. And so that kind of lets me tackle every area. So anyway, let me know what you think about the timing. And if you'd like to see different times for streaming, I'm still working that out. But of course, if you miss streams, then, you know, they're all saved to my YouTube channel and Facebook and all that. So you can make sure that you're, you know, do all the subscribe stuff on YouTube so you get notifications and click the notification bell. You know the drill, right? So anyway, we'll see you next time. And again, thanks for coming.